Oakbridge is glad to present to you a lecture by Professor Rajagopalan on Environment and Ecology. Rajagopalan sir is an eminent author. He's ex-director of International Ocean Institute and he has authored about 14 books on environment. In this lecture, he talks about what are the various aspects of environment and ecology paper and how to go about it.
Overview won't help you answer particular question. Maybe some question, but generally that is not the purpose of this. It is for you to understand overall the situation where we are today with reference to the environment. As I mentioned in the earlier part, I think an overview is very important on any subject actually. So like even when you pick up a book, the first thing you must do is to just skim through the book to get the idea of what it is like. Same thing about subjects also. So an overview of this topic will be useful to you in maybe other papers also, general studies, interviews and so on. Just as an informed citizen of this country and this world, you must know what I am going to talk about, so that other person doesn't believe that, whoever is making that noise. Okay, now this is a mix of some videos and things like that. बंद कर दें और कोई काम हो रहा है। Actually, many of the scenes shown in this movie are true, actually happened, including the police beating and so on. Okay, this is the Adivasi song, and it is very relevant. We will see why that is important. I often begin my lectures with this question. The thing is not to get an answer from you, but to tell you some joke. This is again a Mullah Nasruddin story. Those of you who joined late, I told them all that there was this character called Mullah Nasruddin, a Sufi character, and there are many stories in his name, also called Hoja Nasruddin and so on. Very funny at one level, but they have deeper meaning at a different level. Anyway, this story goes like this, that the mullah is invited by the village to give a talk. So like me, he is invited, he comes. Then he asks a question. They all say, we don't know, we have come to listen. He says, if you don't even know what I am going to talk about, what's the point in my talking to you? So he goes away. So they don't know what to do with him. So next week they call him, expecting something like this. So he again asks the same question. They say, we know. He says, if you already know what I am going to talk about. So he goes away. Now what do you do with this fellow? So next whole week they work out a strategy. So the third week when he comes and asks, they are already prepared. So half of them say, we know, other half says, we don't know. He says, those who know, please tell those who don't know, and he goes away. So the environment, sometimes I feel like doing that in a group like this, because it's not a very nice subject, it's a depressing subject. Anyway, so this is actually an overview. As apart from being civil services aspirant and so on, you are also citizens of this world, and you must understand where we stand today with regard to this. I will focus more on the crisis than on the cure. There are solutions, but the crisis is much more important today to understand. And whatever I am saying is all based on facts. I have not made up it. The idea is not to just frighten you and so on. And the predictions, if any I give, are reasonable ones. So there is a big debate in a country like ours, will always be environmental development. Okay? It's very difficult again to answer that. But now the situation is far beyond that debate also. We will see. Now, I'm sure you all know that there is a problem with the environment. You are facing that, you are reading about it. Now, of course, you are studying the subject also. But what you may not know is that things are much worse than what most people imagine them to be. Because the world is still functioning, so we are also told that we have to do this, India has to develop and all that. So we are not aware that things are probably, some of you may know, but many of us don't know that, how bad it is. Secondly, even if you know that things are bad, you will always think that somebody will solve it. I mean, after all, we are so advanced in science, technology, moon and Mars and everything, we can't solve this petty pollution issue. We should be able to have technology, which may be even partly true, but the problem is we don't have time. Time is our problem now. We are really running short of time. The window of opportunity available to us in order to take some action is really shrinking by the day. Then thirdly, even if you understand all this, that it's really a major problem, you will say, what can I do? I am just an individual struggling with all my issues, what can I do? That is also partly true because individual actions can go only up to a point. But that doesn't mean we should not act. Each one of us has a responsibility to take some action or other. I am frankly frightened. This is true. I am frightened. The more I read about it, now I have been at it for the last 22 years, and year by year I see the situation and I am frightened. I am frightened for my family, for you all actually. There's a limited number of years I am going to be standing like this and boring people with my lectures. But you are all going to live longer and you will face that. So if you just look at monsoon in India the last few years, this is how it is. We had monsoon deficit for 2 years, then there were floods last year, this 2017 also there were floods. So the moral of the story is the climate has become unpredictable in some sense. It's just, you don't know. And if you look at the global situation, you can see that 2016 was the hottest year. I don't still have the figures for 2017. Either it will be hotter or probably equal to that. And 2015 we were just 1 degree Celsius warmer than it was in the pre-industrial times. One may wonder how can 1 degree centigrade make such a difference. See, the remarkable Earth is so finely balanced that even a change in the global average temperature of 1 degree makes a huge big difference in the climate. That is unfortunately the state of affairs. And 2016 was the 5th time in 12 years that we broke the annual temperature record. And 17 of the 18 hottest years ever have all happened in this century actually. That is an irrefutable fact. Any of you heard about this, I'm sure? Yeah? So, yeah, be careful about exact title. It is intergovernmental actually. It's not international. It's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So this was set up by the United Nations several years ago, before climate change was such a major issue actually. But scientists already saw it coming, so somehow UN was persuaded to form this panel. Now this panel is actually consists of a large number of scientists from across the world. More than 1,000 scientists, 1,200 scientists are involved in that. This panel itself does not do research. What it does is looks at published literature in the reviewed journals in the last several years all over the world in the scientific journals. They sit down, look at all that and collate that, and then they prepare a report, what they call the assessment report. And this comes out roughly once in 7 years actually. So the last one was in November 2014, the 5th assessment report. And the conclusion was global warming is happening, there is no doubt about that, and we are the cause of that actually. The earlier report even had a slight bit of doubt in that matter. In this last report, there is no doubt that we are. And why is it happening? Primarily because we are burning too much of fossil fuel. And the current concentration of these greenhouse gases is a record for the last 800,000 years. क्या हो रहा है? ये वाला. That's the situation. So I'll just show you a very short video which was made by the IPCC when they released that last report.
The scientific evidence is stronger than ever. Better and more observations. Improved understanding of the climate system response. Further development of climate models. All point in the same direction. Human influence on the climate system is clear.
IPCC 第50 斯宾诺和第一部作主要做的是气候变化科学，它对应过去6年以来气候系统各个科学的一个分支。所以呢，在气候系统的实际观察中，正是气候系统正在变暖。
We have looked at all the evidences that tell us how the climate has changed in the past and presently. Took that evidence to ask ourselves how we understand the climate system, what the causes of these changes are, and then take that knowledge and climate model simulation to ask ourselves what possible futures are there.
Many of these observed changes are unusual or unprecedented on timescales of decades to millennia. Ice cores contain an abundance of information about climate. Paleoclimate records show a close link between CO2 concentration and temperature. These trends are seen in current observations. Each of the last 3 decades has been warmer than all preceding decades since 1850, and the first decade of the 21st century has been the warmest.
Well, I think in AR5 we've done a much better job of expressing exactly how much different contributions, particular greenhouse gases, have contributed to global warming in the past and how they will contribute in the future. We're able to demonstrate that the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere has increased by 40% since pre-industrial times, mostly as a result of human activities, and that the levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere are higher than they've been for the last 800,000 years in Earth history.
The effects of global warming are most evident in some of the coldest places on the planet. Ice sheets and glaciers worldwide are losing mass. Permafrost is thawing, and the snow and sea ice cover in the Arctic is decreasing.
We're getting a lot of signals from the cryosphere in terms of warming. The most visible signs of warming can be found in the Arctic.
Arctic sea ice extension has shown a downward trend since 1980. A downward trend is also observed at the Greenland ice sheet.
The amount of mass that's lost in Greenland is about 6 times as much as what was observed 10 years ago.
The observed changes in the cryosphere have serious implications. With less snow and ice, more of the sun's energy is absorbed by the ocean and land surface. This is one of the powerful climate change feedbacks that influences the whole climate system. Based on multiple lines of independent evidence, it's now virtually certain that the ocean is warming.
The warming of the ocean will continue even if we stop the atmospheric CO2 concentrations to increase, because the time scale of the ocean circulation, which connects the surface to the deep ocean, is very large in the sort of hundreds and thousands of years.
There are 4 major contributors to sea level rise: ocean heat uptake, melting of glaciers, reduction of ice sheets, and changes in water storage on land. Improved scientific understanding has made scientists able to make a consistent sea level rise budget.
Over the 20th century as a whole, the dominant contributions are ocean level expansion and the contribution from the loss of mass from glaciers. Sea level has risen by about 19 centimetres by 1900 to 2010, and it's continuing to rise. We will have to adapt to sea level rise.
Our understanding of the climate system relies on combining observations and studies from many different scientific disciplines. With the help of supercomputers, this knowledge can provide climate projections for the future.
Climate climate models play an absolutely crucial role in this assessment report. They are the only tools that allow us to say something quantitative about the future. Historically, climate prediction has started with predicting weather, the atmosphere, then we included the ocean, and now we're at the point where we include every component in the Earth system, including the carbon cycle and the chemistry. So that allows us to have a really comprehensive view of all the development processes for future climate change.
Climate change projections require information about future emissions or concentrations of greenhouse gases, aerosols, and other anthropogenic drivers. A new set of scenarios was used to project the cumulative CO2 emissions in the future.
Modern simulations employing the RCP scenarios tell us we have a choice. We have a choice to live in a world in which climate change is limited to less than 2 degrees Celsius, or in a world that is warmer than 4 degrees Celsius.
Climate models employing the RCP scenarios provide policy-relevant information on a regional level. For the first time, Working Group 1 has developed an atlas of global and regional climate projections, which allows decision-makers to see how climate might change in their regions. This can facilitate more informed decisions on adaptation strategies.
We have 3 key messages. The warming in the climate system is unequivocal. That is based on the observations and the multiple lines of independent evidence. The second message is human influence on the climate system is clear. This is resulting from the combination of model simulations with the observed climate change. The third message is that continued greenhouse gas emissions cause further climate change and constitute a multi-century commitment in the future. Therefore, we conclude limiting climate change requires substantial and sustained reductions in greenhouse gas emissions.
So the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, that's really been accelerating, and the upper safety limit is about 350 parts per million. But now we are way ahead of that. There is a graph, this is called the Keeling graph, named after the scientist Keeling, who started making these measurements in Hawaii. And you can see that every year, steadily from 1960, the CO2 concentration has been going up. But every year there will be a slight up and down movement, but there is a clear trend. And the safe limit is actually 350 if we want to limit the climate change in terms of temperature increase to less than 2 degrees average. But we have been just going merrily above, and we have crossed 400 now. If you look at the latest figure, December last is 406 actually. We have been above 400 for quite some time now. And the IPCC also concluded that 2 degrees we can't avoid by the end of this century. But it could be 3 degrees or 4 degrees, then it will be much worse. There is in fact a book called 6 degrees, which tells you what will happen for every degree increase in the global average temperature. And more importantly, it said we will exceed our carbon budget before we run out of fossil fuels. In other words, the climate change will be such a major issue that we should decide, okay, there is still oil left on the ground, but we will not take it out. Because if we take it out and burn it, we will be in a bigger trouble. So that amount of wisdom humanity should have. Whether we will ever have it is a doubtful thing. This is another interesting graph which you can remember. The first was the Keeling graph. This is called the Hubbard curve. So the Hubbard curve actually was measured by a scientist called Hubbard many years ago. What he found was in a group of oil fields, initially the production will go up like that, but then once it reaches roughly, when you have taken out half the amount of oil in the area, it will start inevitably going down. This happened again and again, so he came up with this idea of Hubbard curve. At that time he was dismissed as being cranky, but now we know that is true, and this is called the peaking point. That you can talk about the peaking of oil in a country, in a field and so on, also in the whole world actually. So in other words, once we have taken out about half of the reserves, then we will be down on the other side of the curve. And it is actually for conventional oil, by the way, what is there in Saudi Arabia and many other places. And actually, as predicted by Hubbard, the US peaked in 1970, back in 1970, so many years ago. And that is why they have to go to war and do everything in order to ensure their energy security. Something else happened later, I will tell you presently. But anyway, the world conventional oil most probably has already peaked. In other words, from now on production can only be going down. But what happened was that when you talk about total estimated reserves, nobody knows exactly how much oil is there. But one thing we know, that no new large oil field has been discovered for many, many years now. It is very unlikely. We are now tapping every possible source, including the polar region. Arctic is melting because of climate change. Now you go there to pick up the oil and so on. But there is a limit to all that. So what they did was started looking at unconventional oil, which is available in different forms, like Canada's oil sand, and in US also there is something called the shale. So now technology was developed in such a way that oil could be taken out of it. Earlier it was not economical to do that, so they were not doing it. Now the last several years, US shale oil production has really rocketed to such an extent that that is why in some sense the world oil prices are sort of stable actually. And there is a lot of politics also involved in this whole thing. But the shale oil is a terrible thing because though you get oil, there is environmental destruction of that area, and local farms are affected and so on. There are some people against that, but all that has been stopped. And now with Trump, of course, he has opened the field completely in more and more of such extraction. Canada, some of the areas are totally devastated because this oil sands is on the surface and the whole area has been totally ruined, and the water in that area is also not now fit for use. Anyway, these are all environmentally unfriendly oil, but it is oil actually. So that has now come into the market. We are even importing some of that from the United States. So US oil production doubled, Canada, Iraq started producing more, there was excess production compared to the demand. And Gulf nations actually, they are a very, it's called OPEC, and they will fix the price. And the price fixation is not based on any economics, but it's all geopolitics of oil actually. So if they want now to make the American oil very costly, they will keep their oil prices low, kind of. But all this that you do is only postponing the doomsday. Someday it will all happen. The peak oil will happen with all this shale oil, everything also, there is a limit. Ultimately there is a limit. It's a finite planet. The simple thing to remember is we are living on a finite planet and we think it is an infinite set of resources. That is our problem. Anyway, if you look at India, we are importing more than 80% of our oil. We are the third largest oil consumer after US and China. Japan was ahead of us, now we have crossed Japan. We are now the third. And of course, the current oil import is heavy, and when the oil prices go up, again this bill also will go up. Now what is really the core issue with regard to fossil fuels?
It all started with a big bang. Right? We don't have to go that far. The Earth was formed 4.5 billion years ago. No, it's still too far. Try this. It's the Middle Ages. People in Britain run out of firewood and start burning coal, but they use up the coal on the ground. Miners dig deep, coal mines fill with water. Samuel Newcomen invents a coal-burning steam engine to pump out water so miners can keep digging. James Watt makes it practical for other uses.
Now we have ingredients for the Industrial Revolution, fossil fuels and a way to put them to work. All hell breaks loose. Coal miners bog down lugging coal. Rails make it easier. Rails and steam engine combine to make a railroad. Michael Faraday makes the first electric motor. Nikola Tesla invents alternating current. Soon utility companies start burning coal to generate electricity. Meanwhile, Edwin Drake drills the first rock oil well in Pennsylvania, and Carl Daimler builds an automobile running on petroleum. Coal tar and oil are turned into industrial chemicals and pharmaceuticals that prolong life and population growth. The Wright brothers start oil-fueled aviation. Fritz Haber and Karl Bosch make fertilizer from fossil fuels. Fertilizer and oil-powered tractors expand food production, feeding more people. World War I is the first fossil-fueled conflict. Then comes World War II, giving us guided missiles and atom bombs. In between is a Great Depression, partly caused by overproduction. Powered assembly lines make products faster than people need them. Advertising executives invent consumerism to soak up overproduction. It's the 1950s. Advertisers use television to hook new generations of consumers. In the 70s, there's an oil shock. Everyone's shocked to realize how dependent they are on oil. With the energy crisis, the environmental movement is born. But oil prices fall and everyone forgets energy shortages. There's a showdown between market and planned economies. Market wins. Goodbye, evil Soviet empire. Politicians decide the market will solve everything. Personal computers arrive. Globalization takes over when the market notices labor is cheaper in China. Suddenly everyone has a cell phone, but world oil production stalls out. China is now burning half the world's coal to make export products. But where will China get more coal and oil to fuel more growth? Environmental problems everywhere. Rising CO2 levels lead to record heat waves, floods, droughts. Oceans acidify. Topsoil erodes by 25 billion tons a year from industrial agriculture. Ancient forests disappear. Species go extinct at 1,000 times normal rates. Fresh water is scarce or polluted. Oil companies drill in miles of seawater because the easy oil is gone, but a deep-water oil platform explodes and fouls the Gulf of Mexico. Manufacturing moves to polluting countries where labor is cheap, while the U.S. becomes a casino. The financial sector is 40% of the economy. But Wall Street is over-leveraged. Banks fail, unemployment soars, credit evaporates, the economy is on the verge of collapse. Okay, present time. It's amazing how far we've come in 200 years, just 3 human lifetimes, from the beginning of industrialism till now. But where are we headed? We can't keep doubling human population. We can't keep dumping carbon in the atmosphere. We can't keep ruining topsoil. We can't keep growing population and consumption or basing our economy on depleting fossil fuels. We can't just print more money to solve the debt crisis. It's been an exhilarating ride, but there are limits. No, it's not the end of the world, but we have to do 4 things fast. Learn to live without fossil fuels, adapt to the end of economic growth as we've known it, support 7 billion humans and stabilize population at a sustainable level, and deal with our legacy of environmental destruction. In short, we have to live within nature's budget of renewable resources at rates of natural replenishment. Can we do it? We have no choice. Alternative energy sources are important, but none can fully replace fossil fuels in the time we have. Also, we've designed and built our infrastructure for transport electricity and farming to suit oil, coal, and gas. Changing to different energy sources will require us to redesign cities, manufacturing processes, healthcare, and more. We'll also have to rethink some of our cultural values. None of our global problems can be tackled in isolation, and many cannot be fully solved. We have to prepare for business as unusual. Our best goal is resilience, the ability to absorb shocks and keep going. If we do nothing, we still get to a post-carbon future, but it will be bleak. However, if we plan the transition, we can have a world that supports robust communities of healthy, creative people and ecosystems with millions of other species. One way or the other, we're in for the ride of a lifetime. Understand the issues and pitch in. It's all hands on deck.
Any idea? Maldives. Maldives is a good candidate for this. Well, it's really happening to this country called Tuvalu. Yeah, this is a set of coral islands in the Pacific, and it's disappearing. Every year the sea level is going up, some part of the island is gone, and in another probably 10 years this country will cease to exist. And it has about 11,000 population, and they have to go somewhere. So they wanted to go to Australia, because that's the nearest large developed country, and Australia said 11,000, it's too many, we cannot take it. So I think we should invite them to India, right? How does it matter? Another 11,000. Anyway.
A day's population perhaps.
Right. Anyway, so that is the case. This will be the world's first disappearance of a country due to climate change. But don't think it is somewhere in Pacific. It is happening right in our backyard in the Sundarbans area. Already some islands like this Lohachara have disappeared, and there are 50,000 people living on Lohachara. They have quietly moved to other islands. Nobody has ever even reported about it much. And what happens to the sea level is it will go up, come down a bit, go up again, but next time it will go up to a higher level. That is what is happening. So it is not, it's a problem that is going to face us, all the Pacific Ocean islands and all the coastal cities. And it so happens, obvious reasons, some of the largest cities of the world are on the coast, which includes, of course, Mumbai and in a way Calcutta also, and Sao Paulo in Brazil and so on. And they will all be in trouble, actually. That is what is going to happen. What is the answer to this question? Oh, climate change is in
Earthquake?
This is the melting of Himalayan glaciers. That they are melting, absolutely no doubt. This is actually a photograph of the same point taken 1921 and 2007. You can see the difference. And there is even a better one here. This is actually Mount Everest, and you can see compared to 1921 and 2009 how much of ice we have lost. Now the Himalayan glaciers are very important because that is the source of many of the rivers of all these countries. So when they start melting in a bigger way, then there will be more floods initially, but once that is over, there will be drought. And millions of people are actually dependent on these rivers. Bad shape. And at the end, of course, who knows, bell may ring, something may happen, we may be released, kind of a thing. So it's a normal classroom thing. Of course, now I know that civil service aspirants are a totally different category. They don't budge, maybe their attention span is also different, it doesn't follow this graph. Anyway, so what does one do? So that is what I was saying, that when I became first a teacher, I started wondering how to keep a class really interested. So finally, at some point I hit upon this, that something I must do to shake up the audience, okay? Even the fellow who is sleeping will suddenly wake up. Everybody is laughing, something is happening. So humor is one way. So what kind of humor? I said I tried others and so on, and finally I settled on Mullah Nasruddin. It's really great. There are lots of stories. I don't know how many of them are original or they have been developed over the years and come to India and so on. So there is one story. So Mullah is, the neighbor is walking and he finds Mullah very busily searching for something under the lamppost. So the neighbor asked, what did you lose? He said, I lost my key. But where did you lose it? Do you know? I lost it there. But then why are you looking here? This is where light is available. So often, if you think about it, we search for things in the wrong place because we think that is where it's easy to find, the answer to our problems. Then Mullah goes to the museum. So he's going with a group. There is a guide. The guide picks up an item and says, this is 2000 years old. So Mullah raises his hand and says, you are wrong, it is actually 2002 years old. So the guide is perplexed, he goes to the next item, he says, this is 3000 years old. Mullah again raises his hand and he says, sorry, it is 3002 years old. So after everything is over, the guide calls Mullah and says, are you an archaeologist that you know exactly the date? He said, no, I came here 2 years ago and you said the same thing. Now, coming back to our topic, this is another thing that we are really drowning. Our cities are drowning in garbage. I come from Bangalore and it's in a terrible state because of this garbage. And you can see, this is Delhi's. Look at this girl. The rest of her life she will be spending here searching for things. So in fact it is said that by 2025 we will be generating something like 6 million tons a day, which is enough to fill a rubbish trucks 5,000 kilometers long. And we just don't know what to do with them. All our cities are in trouble because what do we do with this garbage? First of all, they should be separated into organic waste and non-organic. That is not done. Householders don't want to do it, so on. There is a problem. But even if you do, where do you dump this garbage actually? You have to go outside the city. Now outside the city, the villagers are now protesting. Earlier, there was nobody living there, corporations were dumping. Now they are protesting. So there is a huge, big problem. What about the mighty ocean? We think that, 71% of the earth, what can really happen to the ocean? Well, we are doing our best. This is a baby albatross chick. Albatross is a very large seabird. This is an albatross chick and it is lying dead in a very remote island called Midway Atoll in the Pacific. Very remote island actually. No real, any civilization very nearby. But it is dead because it has been eating plastic. How did it get this plastic at all actually? How did the mother bird get the plastic? It got the plastic from what are known as the Great Pacific Garbage Patches. Now what happens to all the plastic that we throw in our beaches, Bombay and Madras and everywhere? Due to ocean currents, they collect in certain places actually. And there is a heavy concentration of plastic. So this is actually, these are the areas, some of the areas. This western garbage patch, eastern, they are huge. Several 100 kilometers in size actually, more than that actually. Very, very large kind of a garbage patch. And these are often fine plastic and you cannot remove them now. How can you remove them? You cannot remove them. There is no technology available now. I don't think we will ever be able to develop something that will remove that. So that plastic is now fed by the bird. It is actually ingested by the fish, which finally we catch and eat. That is what is going on with the ocean. There are many other issues with the ocean. I won't get into that. But we have not been treating the ocean very fairly either. Well, there are so many things like this. I can go on. Water, of course, is becoming scarce. That we are all facing ourselves. World fisheries, by the middle of the century, all the big stocks would probably have gone. And food crisis, right now there was a food crisis. We seem to got over that. But bigger one is probably on the way. And forest cover is gone. Biological diversity, which we don't realize at all, because we don't know when a species disappears. Okay, when you put your foot somewhere, you may be killing the last member of that species, but you don't know that. But biological diversity is extremely important because the universe, the earth is a very complex web. And when we remove some species by our action, we are really cutting at random a very, very strongly connected kind of a system. The impact of it, we don't know. One famous biologist called Wilson, Harvard University, said that if all the human beings disappear today, the world will come back to its natural state fairly soon. But if all the insects disappear today, it cannot come back for a very, very long time actually. That is the importance of this biological diversity. I'm going to show you a picture. Some of you may have seen that, others will recognize it. You know what this is? It is Bhopal. The day after Bhopal, father is actually burying his ring. But my point here is not the Bhopal tragedy or what Union Carbide did or did not do, but the fact is that question we should ask, why do we need such large pesticide companies, factories? We need it because we are on a path of this green revolution, which we must feed with more and more pesticides and fertilizer. Okay? We are on that path. We are not able to now come back out of that. It's very difficult. So that is the question we have to ask, and that's a whole subject in itself. This you will not recognize probably. This is Chernobyl. It is the same building which actually blew up. What happened was, when it blew up and they had to somehow cover it, they poured concrete from helicopters actually on the next day and covered it. Now it is developing cracks. It's now more than 20-25 years developing cracks. And if it again opens up, we don't know what's going to happen. Know what they are doing now? They are building a cover. It's about $2 billion. It's been spent by several countries, have contributed to that. And this is now this is slightly last year's photograph. By now they may have moved it over that building. That is the building actually. So nuclear power, when it was first proposed, when it was first, they started making power out of it, Eisenhower is supposed to have said, it will be too cheap to meter, it will be free, given to you. But that is not what happened. First of all, the technology was more complex than what was expected, and accidents, and to decommission a nuclear plant costs more than building it actually. That is the state of affairs. And I won't get into that, except that more recently we had this Fukushima. Even after 6 years, so many troubles are still there in Japan. Many of the people have not gone back to their old dwellings. It's a very fairly serious issue. But of course, we are on the path of growth, production, so we are also doing this. Well, to cut the story short, we are actually consuming our natural resources at a rapid rate, and secondly, in that process, we are also polluting the planet. This together is what is landing us into climate change and a whole lot of other problems. And one way of measuring it is through this concept called ecological footprint. What is this ecological footprint? It is the area required to sustain any entity indefinitely. Okay? So we can talk about ecological footprint of a city. For example, the footprint of Delhi is much, much bigger than the geographical area of Delhi, actually, because we draw resources from so many outside Delhi, and we also dump a lot of our garbage outside. So our footprint is large. So if you look at it like that, and it's measured in global hectares per person, and the global footprint is 2.84 global hectares per person, whereas the biological capacity is actually only 1.73. So in some sense, our ecological footprint is already 64% larger. When I say this and you start thinking about it, you wonder, how is it possible? If as a whole humanity is consuming so much, so on, how are we then surviving? We should all be lying dead. We are surviving because of two reasons. One is, large parts of the humanity's population is not using resources. They use very little resources. We use their resources, their share also. That is one reason. Second thing is, we are dipping into the future. What is rightfully our children's and grandchildren's thing, we are using right now, water or oil and so on. So we are surviving. So, but it cannot go on forever. And we have only one planet. We can't find a second planet as yet. And of course, even if they buy the ticket, will be a bit costly. So, what does it all mean? Actually, another way of looking at it is, by about September, October, we have finished off this year's allotted resources that Earth has allotted to us. Because Earth can regenerate many things. After all, every year rain comes, every year water comes. But in about 7-8 months, we are through with this year's quota, and we are already using next year's quota and the future quota. that is what is happening. So I won't get into this. India's footprint is also very bad now because of our population. And why is it so large? Simple reason is from the industrial times, once industrial revolution and all started, right, somewhere about 2 centuries ago, everything started going up like this. The total goods and services produced goes up like this. Number of scientists goes up like this. CO2 goes up like this. So this exponential growth is the one that is responsible. And this will actually go on like this vertically. Now this cannot be sustained in any case. Actually somewhere this level has to start leveling off. That means we cannot use resources the way we are using now. And how did that happen? That happened because with the scientific and industrial revolution, our attitude towards nature changed. Earlier at least there was some kind of a living with part of nature, and we thought nature was also important. But after this thing, man found enormous capacity in terms of science and technology. He said, we are not now part of nature, we can exploit nature any way we want, and there is infinite supply, which is actually not true. And we also started measuring our progress in terms of the GDP, gross domestic product and so on, which is a false measure of real progress actually. But today, you open the paper, today's paper, it will say 6%, 7%, that we can't get out of that mindset. That mindset was not an Indian mindset, it was not the Chinese mindset. It was borrowed by us from the West. Once we have done that, we have completely internalized it. All of us actually at some level believe in that kind of a progress, of economic progress. People will say, how can we now survive? Our poverty has to go, so economic progress is needed. Okay. I won't get into the debate. There are other answers to that, other possible measures. You have all heard, of course, of Bhutan's measure of happiness and so on. Then forget about that. That you can say Bhutan is a small country and you need a king for that. I mean, we also have a local king here, but he has not yet declared himself to be a king. So it is possible, but you look at there are other models of economy one can try and do, which is more sustainable than what it is now. At least the measure of what is good for the people. This is actually a wrong one. Now what have we been doing about it? Okay, there have been reports and meetings and so on, right from 1972 onwards actually. It's very strange that 1945 the World War II ended, then the rapid industrialization started of Europe and Japan and all, and America again. But within 15 years, by the end of the 60s, already people thought there is some problem with the environment actually. But it has taken a long time to really settle in, but meanwhile so many countries became independent, so we all wanted to produce goods and services in the same way, so we are all using up the resources. So all these conferences were held, Rio plus 10, Rio plus 20, Copenhagen is of course a climate change conference, and Paris. So all these were done, but so far implementation has been poor, actually, even the earlier conferences. We of course have a lot of environmental laws, mostly after Bhopal actually. But our implementation again is poor, and we are also diluting those laws. But the first thing that this new government did was to set up a committee. Essentially the terms of reference was how to dilute the laws, environmental laws. Trump has already in 1 year he has diluted enormous number of regulations in America. Anyway, that is what is going on. Why is it happening? There is really no will to change. There is no real awareness of where we are today actually. Anybody like me saying, he will say it's all, it's just frightening us. That is not true. Growth will save us. This growth is another thing, study that. I am sure that will be useful for your exam. The so-called trickle-down theory, that, once there is a general increase in the GDP and so on, Ambani will have so much money that some of it will trickle down to you. Don't believe that. That's not happening in many countries actually. Anyway, it's based on that everybody will prosper if the country as a whole prospers. But actual fact is inequality has been growing. actually. In this country, in America and so many other places, globally also. Global Inequality Report was published recently. It's a terrible kind of a situation. On one hand, there is new technology, so many things happening, but the poor people are becoming poorer. There are certainly a large number of poor have been made into some reasonable level. That has also happened, I am not denying that. But the inequality, meanwhile the rich fellows have got even richer actually. So the inequality is very, very high. Anyway, there is misinformation. We won't give up our comfort, will I? I don't know. All I am talking, I won't probably give up all my comforts and go and live in a hut. Will I do that? Even there I will ask for internet connection. So that is a problem. Then of course politicians have a short view, 5-year view or whatever it is until the next election. You have to survive somehow. So don't take any unpopular decisions. No, don't need. Still, Mullah is listening to the governor's speech, local governor, he doesn't like it. He turns to the woman sitting next to him and he says, this governor is terrible, it's a boring speech. She looks at him and says, do you know who I am? He says, I don't know, I am the governor's wife. Mullah doesn't know what to. He stands up and asks her, do you know who I am? She says, I don't know. He said, very good, and he runs away from there. So finally, coming back to climate change, we must keep it within 2 degrees rise. That should be our focus. Okay? So we have to reduce the CO2 level also to 350 parts per million. But there is a carbon budget. It has been calculated that we can place about 3000 gigatons of carbon in the atmosphere if we want to keep the temperature increase to 2 degrees. But out of which we have already put 2000 gigatons. So only 1000 gigatons are left in the budget. Now the question is, who is going to use the budget? So a few countries are now using it up maximum. So should we now have a budget like that? We don't know. Nobody is going to agree on that. Anyway, so within 30 years we will use it up, and beyond 2 degrees we just don't know what will happen. What happened in India? Because Manmohan Singh set up this Council on Climate Change, National Action Plan, 8 national missions. And 2014 this government said, no, we must do something new. So they changed the name of the ministry into Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. So half the job done. Then PM's council reconstitute, remove all the good fellows, put our own fellows. That's done. Then why not have 4 more national missions? Okay, that is done. So that is what they did. In 2015, we had to submit to the UNFCCC our own plan, which also we did. Now these are all the missions. Nobody knows which mission is working, which mission is not working. You don't know whether water mission is working, but when you open the tap, there is no water. But you think it is working. So there is all these problems. Then of course these 4 more missions, wind energy. We are doing something on solar energy, certainly. We are doing something on wind energy, certainly. That's all done. But whether we can replace completely fossil fuels with that is highly doubtful. So this Paris meeting was heralded as this time you must do something or we will be in trouble. Copenhagen, everything failed. So in Paris, they got together and so they wanted to work out this agreement. And of course all the leaders went there, Obama went there, and of course Modi was there and so on. And before that we were supposed to submit this INDC, that is the intended nationally determined contribution. That is a voluntary report that, okay, we will do this much, we will contribute this much by reducing this. So that is a climate action we are supposed to take. Our INDC said we will reduce this emissions intensity, which is GDP per ton of emissions, we will reduce, so that by about 35% we will do, that ratio we will reduce. Then 40% of electric power will be non-fossil, carbon sink, and so on, many things were made. Now many countries submitted these INDCs. Then UNEP did an exercise. Suppose all these countries stick to their plans and their promises, what will happen? It turned out, even if all of the countries did that, the temperature rise will be 3 degrees. It will not be 2 degrees. Anyway, is India's plan feasible? We don't know. I don't think we are doing much about it. Who will pay the cost? That's another question. How can we balance development and climate change commitment? It's a bigger question. So this is what I said. UNEP estimate was like that. So in Paris, there were 2 weeks of negotiations and a lot of push by Obama and Americans and so on. And finally, this agreement was adopted. Okay? And it said that, of course, we will keep it not just 2 degrees, we will try to limit it to 1.5. Fine. But countries to pursue domestic measures and so on, and they should report regularly, completely voluntary. There is no monitoring or no international pressure in that sense. And we must submit where we are every 5 years. I hope you got the message of this cartoon, actually. So why is it not going to save the world? Because it does not bind any country. That is one. And no mention of global carbon budget and how are we going to let countries use that budget. No clear provisions on financing the whole operation. And also, important thing, historical responsibility of the developed countries. Earlier we were saying that, Indira Gandhi said long ago, we are not at fault, you guys are at fault. You caused all the pollution, most of the pollution, but we have to develop now, we have to let us do it. So that argument is now gone. In this, for the first time, UN think historical responsibility has been removed. We are all on the same playing field. And developing countries, we cannot claim any compensation from the developed countries. India ratified, agreement hasn't come into force, but United States, because Obama he understood that there is something called climate change. He did many things, not only internationally, even at the national level, he did several things. But
not only does this deal subject our citizens to harsh economic restrictions,
wrong.
It fails to live up to our environmental ideals. As someone who cares deeply about the environment, which I do, I cannot in good conscience support a deal that punishes the United States, which is what it does. The world's leader in environmental protection, while imposing no meaningful obligations on the world's leading polluters. For example, under the agreement, China will be able to increase these emissions by a staggering number of years, 13. They can do whatever they want for 13 years, not us. India makes its participation contingent on receiving billions and billions and billions of dollars in foreign aid from developed countries. There are many other examples, but the bottom line is that the Paris Accord is very unfair at the highest level to the United States.
Actually, what he said is not true, by the way. India never asked for billions and billions of dollars and so on. And you know that. He doesn't read anything, doesn't understand it. And last week he said that there's cold wave in the US, so it's good, global warming is will be good for us. Things like that. So there is, anyway, one thing is that their leaving the Paris Agreement is not such a big thing in some sense. Now the other countries have all said, we will still do our best and so on. There was another meeting recently. But we know that the amount of things even under the agreement is nothing. Not really what we should be doing. It's far less. Anyway, but where will the answer finally come from? I am pessimistic that governments will do anything. we ourselves are not doing such a great job actually. We have solar energy and wind energy and so on, but really not what we should be doing. And so that's also true of China and Japan and all the big countries. But it may come from the people. Whether it will, I'm not sure, but there is a chance. I started with that Adivasi song. Okay, there is a major problem actually in the Adivasi belts, in the where there is this, all these damn minerals are available, Chhattisgarh and Orissa and other places, where Adivasis have been simply displaced because we want those minerals actually. So there is a protest. It's still not such a major thing. It's not. Some cases they have stopped the factory and so on, but some cases they have not been able to. But maybe overall things will happen. But this is what happened. On the 21st of September 2014, there was a UN climate summit on 22nd. Ban Ki-moon had organized that. The day before that, this was just like our own Adivasis, the indigenous people in many parts of the world, including the United States, Latin America and so on, are in big trouble because they are being displaced and a lot of areas are being ruined. And this is what that march did. Thank you.